The space trader walked through the dusty port, his boots heavy, his eyes tired from long travel. He had seen many worlds and many faces, but today, he came only to collect what was owed to him, and nothing more. He expected credits or fuel, or maybe scrap metal, but when the debtor stepped out from the shadows, he carried something different and strange. A girl, her wrists chained, her steps slow, her gaze fierce and unbroken. The debtor shoved her forward and said, "Take her. She is payment, she is all I can give." The trader stared in silence. He did not like this. He never wanted a slave. He hated the trade of bodies and broken lives. But the law of this port was brutal. If he refused the payment, he might lose his claim altogether, and so he stood there thinking if he should walk away or take her and deal with the burden later. The girl raised her head, her eyes sharp like blades, her voice soft yet steady. She said, "Do not take me, I am no slave." He felt a sting inside his chest, because her words sounded too strong to be a lie. Still, the debtor laughed and pushed her harder, saying, "She is stubborn, but she will obey with time." The trader clenched his jaw and finally nodded. He would take her because leaving her behind felt worse. And so the chains were placed in his hand. He walked her across the port. His mind troubled. The sun of the alien world burned above them, and the crowd whispered as they passed. He felt every stare, every question why a man like him, a free trader, would accept a chained girl. He led her to his ship, a vessel, old but strong. And when the hatch closed behind them, silence filled the air. She stood tall, even with iron on her wrists, her back straight, her chin raised. He asked her name. She refused to answer. He asked again, and she said only, "I am no one." He frowned and turned away, setting course for the stars. But in his mind, the question grew: who was she really? No ordinary slave had eyes like hers. No ordinary slave spoke with such pride as the ship drifted into black space. He tried to ignore her, but his ears caught her whispers at night. She sat alone in the corner, her lips moving in a language he barely understood, a plea, a prayer for someone to come find her. Her voice cracked with both sorrow and power, and though he pretended not to listen, his heart grew restless. He thought of selling her to erase his debt, to trade her in another market, to be free of this burden. But each time the thought came, he felt shame. He knew she did not belong in chains. She carried herself like someone born to command, someone who had lost much but refused to bow. One cycle later, they landed on a barren moon to refuel. As he stepped out to deal with supplies, two men tried to ambush him, blades drawn. But before they struck, the girl leaped forward, her chains clanging. She shoved one to the ground and shouted a warning. Her courage gave him just enough time to draw his weapon and drive the attackers away. Breathless, he turned to her. "Why did you save me?" She answered simply, "Because you are not like the others. You are human, and I trust you more than them." Her words unsettled him. She had seen something in him he did not see in himself. Night, as the ship cut across the void, he noticed a strange mark on her arm, half hidden beneath torn cloth. It was a circle with a star at the center, burned deep into her skin. He froze. He had seen this mark once, long ago, in the archives of a forgotten empire. It was the emblem of a royal house, thought destroyed in war. He looked at her again, and the truth pressed against his chest. The way she stood, the way she spoke, the way she fought. No slave, no commoner could be like this. She was something more. He tried to ask her about the mark, but she turned away, her voice cold. "Do not speak of it. You know nothing." He wanted to push, but the fear in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he stayed silent, and the silence grew heavy between them. The trader could not sleep. His mind spun with questions. If she truly carried the emblem, then she was not only valuable, she was dangerous, because the enemies of her house would kill to silence her forever. And now he was holding her in his ship with no way to escape what was coming. And still, when he looked at her, he did not see trouble. He saw fire, a spark that could light or burn. He knew he could sell her and earn more than he ever dreamed. He knew he could abandon her and be free. But his heart whispered that his fate had already changed. The moment he took the chains from that debtor and brought her aboard, somewhere deep in the ship, her voice rose again. A whisper in the alien tongue, a cry carried across the steel walls. and he understood only one word: help. The ship drifted through endless dark sky, and the traitor felt the silence heavy around him. He tried to keep his focus on the stars and the charts, but the presence of the girl pulled his mind again and again. She did not act like a slave, she carried herself like someone who knew power, someone who once had command and had lost it, yet refused to bend her spirit. She sat near the corner, her wrists still bound in chains, but her eyes always watched every move he made. She did not ask for food, yet when he gave it, she accepted with dignity. She did not ask for water, yet when he handed it to her, she held it like it was a gift from a king. The traitor knew something was hidden under her calm face, something sharp and dangerous. One night, as the engines hummed low, he heard her voice again, whispering in the alien tongue. He could not understand the words, yet her tone was clear. It was a message, a plea, a call to someone far away. The sound made his skin cold, because she spoke as if she expected someone to hear her across space. He tried to ignore it, but curiosity aided him. Finally he asked her, "What are you saying?" She turned her head, and her eyes narrowed. She said, "I am speaking to those who may still remember me. You will not understand." And she turned away. The traitor felt anger rise, but also pity, because her voice had cracked like someone begging for hope. The next day, he gave her a task. He asked her to help fix a loose panel in the engine room, thinking it would keep her busy, but she moved with skill beyond what he expected. Her hands worked fast and steady, her knowledge clear. She knew machines, she knew power grids, she knew things no slave should know. He asked her again, "Who are you really?" This time she looked at him and said, "I told you. I am no one." But her voice trembled and her eyes carried a storm. The traitor knew she was lying. Later, when they landed on a small outpost to trade fuel, a group of rough men surrounded them, their eyes fixed on the girl. They whispered among themselves, pointing at the emblem on her arm, half visible under torn cloth. One of them stepped forward and said, "Where did you get her? She is worth more than your ship. Give her to us." The traitor felt the air turn cold. He drew his weapon and told them back away, but the men laughed and said, "She is marked, you fool. Do you not know what she is?" The traitor pulled her close and led her away, his mind spinning as they escaped the outpost. The words of the men echoed in his skull. She is marked, she is worth more than your ship. What did that mean? Why were they so desperate to take her? What secret did she carry? That night he studied her again as she slept, her face calm, but her fists clenched like someone fighting in dreams. He stared at the emblem on her skin and memory struck him again. The archives of an old royal house, the lost family of a fallen empire. He had heard stories of their downfall, how the king and queen were killed, how the heirs were hunted and erased, but some said one had escaped. And if so, then the girl in his ship might be the last of her line. He felt fear and awe mixing inside him, because if it was true, then the girl was not only valuable, she was a target. Every bounty hunter, every soldier of the enemy would come for her, and anyone with her would be marked for death. The next morning he tried once more. He asked her about the emblem and about her skill with machines. He told her, "I have seen that mark before. It belongs to a house that no longer exists. You cannot lie to me forever." She stared at him for a long moment and then turned her head away, but he saw her lips tremble. Hours later, the ship shook. Alarms blaring, an attack from raiders, fast ships armed with cannons. The traitor rushed to controls, but the girl broke her silence. She shouted commands sharp and clear like a captain in battle. She told him when to turn, when to fire, when to cut the engines and drift. The raiders fell behind, confused by her moves, her voice strong and steady, guiding him to victory. When the danger passed, the traitor looked at her in shock and said, "You are no slave, no servant. Who are you truly, and why do men hunt you?" She stood silent for a long time, and then spoke with voice heavy like stone. She said, "You would not believe me even if I told you." The traitor stepped closer, his eyes burning with questions. He said, "Then show me, tell me, give me the truth. I cannot help you." She lifted her chained hands, and for the first time, her eyes softened. She whispered, "You already know, do you not? And He felt the weight of her words because yes, deep inside he already knew, still she refused to speak. Further, her silence pressing on him like chains of his own, but he saw the fear behind. Her pride, the pain hidden in her strength, and he understood that the truth was something heavy, something dark that she carried alone. As the ship moved deeper into uncharted space, he could not rest. He felt every shadow watching, every star hiding enemies. He knew the secret of the girl was dangerous, and he knew that soon it would break free and change both their lives forever. And in the quiet hours as he tried to sleep, he heard her whisper again in that strange tongue, a single word again and again: help, help, help. The traitor could not push away the truth pressing inside his chest. He looked at the girl chained in his ship, and he knew she carried a secret bigger than both of them. He tried to keep his thoughts calm, but every time he remembered her voice, her skill, her emblem, he felt the weight of something ancient and powerful that was hiding behind her silence. For many days he said nothing, and she said nothing too. But the silence between them was like fire. It burned the air, heavy and restless. Finally, one night when the stars outside were sharp and bright, he turned to her and asked again, tell me who you are. Tell me why men hunt you. Tell me why you whisper to the stars, and why you fight like a warrior when you are meant to be a slave. She stared at him, her eyes dark like storms. Then she took a long breath and spoke. She said, I will tell you but once, and if you betray me, then both our lives will end. She raised her chained hands, and her voice grew strong. I am not a slave, I am not a servant. I am the last daughter of a fallen throne. I am the princess of a world destroyed by war. The traitor felt his heart stop. He had guessed it, but hearing the words struck him like a blade. She looked at him, her face calm but her voice heavy with pain. She said, my family was murdered. My people scattered, my crown stolen. I was taken as a prize, hidden in chains, so no one would ever know I survived her. Words cut the air like thunder. She told him how her world had burned when invaders stormed the palace, how her parents fought to the last, how she was carried away by those who betrayed her blood. She said, I was only a girl, but I was forced to watch my home fall. I was forced to watch my name erased. They wanted me forgotten. They wanted me dead. But I lived hidden in shadows, waiting for a chance, waiting for help. The traitor listened to every word like fire against his chest. He saw in her eyes not just sorrow, but also fire, the kind of fire that could raise nations or burn them down. He said softly, if what you say is true, then you are hunted by every enemy of your throne, and by every man who desires its power. She nodded and said, yes, they hunt me still. They fear my bloodline. They fear my claim to the throne. They fear what I am. For the first time he felt fear, not for himself, but for her, because he knew carrying her in his ship meant danger beyond measure. Yet he also felt a strange pride that she had chosen to tell him her truth. He asked her, why tell me? Why trust me? She answered, because you are human, and I have seen your honor when you could have sold me. You did not when you could have abandoned me. You did not when you looked at me. You saw more than chains. Her words struck him deeper than any blade. He felt something grow inside his chest, something he could not name, but it gave him strength. He told her then, you are no longer a secret to me, and if you choose, I will stand with you, no matter the cost. She looked at him long and hard, then nodded, but her eyes still held sadness. That night the ship alarms rang again. Hunters had found them sleek ships with black sails, weapons hot and ready. They fired upon the traitor's vessel, shaking metal walls. The traitor rushed to controls, but the princess stood beside him, her voice steady, giving orders. Turn. Now fire, now cut the engine drift. Now her words like fire guiding his hands. They fought side by side, blasting enemy ships, dodging flames, until finally silence returned. Breathless, the traitor turned to her and said, you saved us again. She looked at him, her face pale but proud. She said, I have commanded fleets before. I have led men into war. I know how to fight, even if I wear chains. He felt the truth heavy inside her words. She was no ordinary survivor. She was a leader, broken but unbowed. As the ship drifted safe for the moment, the princess finally lowered her head, her voice soft. She said, I do not ask you to believe me, but I ask you to keep my secret, for if the wrong ears hear it, we will both be dead. He nodded and promised her, I will not betray you, I will not speak of it. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, trust bloomed like a small light in the dark. But danger still followed them, for every time she whispered into the stars, she hoped her loyal kin would hear, but every time she did so, the enemies drew closer, tracking her voice across the void. The traitor knew it was only a matter of time before the storm would fall upon them again. As he lay in his bunk that night, he felt the weight of his choice. He had taken her as payment, but now she was far more than debt. She was fate itself pressing into his life. He closed his eyes and thought of her words. I am the last daughter of a fallen throne, and he knew his life would never again be simple. The ship moved on, but in the quiet dark, her voice rose once more, a whisper, trembling with sorrow and hope, and though he could not understand the language, he felt the meaning deep inside. She was calling not just for help, but for justice and for freedom. The ship carried them deeper into black space, and the traitor could feel the storm growing behind them. Every day new signals, new warnings, new whispers across the channels that hunters were closing in. He knew the secret of the princess could not stay hidden forever. He knew that carrying her was like carrying fire in his hands, but still he did not let her go. The princess no longer hid her strength. She stood beside him at the controls, her eyes sharp, her hands steady, her voice giving orders in the middle of danger. She had once been a leader, and even now in chains she carried the air of command. He felt himself drawn to her, not as a master, but as a soldier beside his captain. One night as the stars glowed cold, she spoke softly. She said, you should leave me. If they find us, they will kill you. I am nothing but death to those who stand near me. But the traitor shook his head and said, I will not leave you. You are not a burden. You are a person, and I gave you my word. She looked at him, and for the first time her eyes filled with tears. She said, I have lost everything, my home, my family, my name. But now you give me honor again. Her words burned into him like light in the dark. He felt pride and pain all at once, for he knew the weight she carried was heavy, and yet she still stood tall. He thought to himself that humanity was often called weak by the stars, but in this moment, he felt stronger than he ever had before. Soon the alarms rang again, enemy ships dropping out of warp, their guns hot. The traitor rushed to the helm, and the princess, chained but fierce, stood beside him. They fought together, weaving through blasts of fire. She shouted orders like a general, he followed them like a soldier, and together they broke through the storm. Their small ship scarred, but alive. When the last shot faded, the traitor sat back gasping, his hands shaking. But the princess touched his shoulder and said, you fought well, like one of us, like a warrior of the throne. He laughed bitterly and said, I am only a traitor, nothing more. She shook her head and said, no, you are more. You are human, and humans carry strength in ways others cannot see. Her words lingered in his chest as they floated through wreckage of defeated ships. They found fragments of data among the ruins, and in that data was a map, a path leading to the core of the empire that had destroyed her house. It was dangerous, it was madness, but it also carried the truth of her past. She stared at the map, her face pale, her hands trembling. She said, this leads to the heart of my enemy. This leads to those who burned my home. If we go there, we may die, but if we do not, then I will always be hunted, always be chained. The traitor listened, and then said, if we must face them, then we will. I will not run from your fight. She looked at him in shock and whispered, why would you risk everything for me? He answered, because no one should be left in chains. No one should be left alone. From that moment, the bond between them grew not of chains and debt, but of trust and fire. They trained together. She taught him old codes of command. He taught her the hidden tricks of a free trader. She spoke of her dreams of freedom. He listened in silence, feeling his heart shift with every word. Days later, another attack came, this time larger, faster, a fleet of hunters sent to end them. The battle was fire and metal shaking, the ship tearing the walls. The traitor fought with fury, the princess with fire in her voice, shouting orders, guiding him through Chaos, they stood side by side against death, and when the smoke cleared, they were alive again, scarred but unbroken. She looked at him, then her eyes burning with something fierce, she said, "You are not my master, you are my ally, my equal, my friend, and I will never forget what you have done for me." He felt her words heavy in his chest. He had once taken her as payment, but now she was no payment, no slave. She was a flame that had changed his life. They both knew the road ahead was dark. They both knew the empire would not stop until her blood was spilled, but they also knew they had each other, and in that bond, there was strength greater than fear. That night, as the ship cut across black space, she sat beside him, her chains still on her wrists, but her spirit free. She whispered softly, "One day I will be free of these chains. One day I will reclaim my throne. One day I will honor those who stood with me." And he answered quietly, "And I will be there to see it." In that moment, the silence of space felt less heavy. The stars felt less cold. For they were no longer alone. They were bound by fire, by danger, by fate itself. But still in the distance, signals grew stronger, fleets moving closer, shadows gathering. The final storm was coming, and both of them knew their bond would soon be tested in fire greater than any they had faced before. The black sea of stars stretched endless before them, but the traitor and the princess both knew their journey was nearing its end. The map they had found carried them into the heart of danger, into the core where the enemy empire ruled with iron and fire. The princess stood at the window, her chains heavy, but her spirit free, her eyes sharp with resolve. She said softly, "This is where it must end. This is where I will take back what was stolen." The traitor nodded, his hands steady on the controls. Though his heart pounded, he said, "Then we will go, and we will not turn away." Ship drifted into the shadow of a massive fortress world, towers of steel and fire, rising like mountains, fleets of warships circling like wolves. The traitor felt the weight of death in the air, but the princess did not tremble. Her voice was calm. She said, "I was born for this moment. I may fall here, but I will not bow again." The traitor looked at her and saw not a slave, not a broken girl, but a queen waiting to rise. The alarm screamed as hunters spotted their vessel, waves of ships rushing forward, cannons burning. The traitor gripped the helm, and the princess stood beside him. Shouting commands together, they wove through fire blasts shaking the hull. The traitor cursed under his breath, but still he followed her voice. She guided him like a star, her knowledge sharp, her courage fierce. Their small ship danced through giants and survived, but soon they were surrounded. Too many to fight, too many to escape. The traitor turned to her and said, "This may be the end." She met his eyes and said, "Then let it be an end. They will never forget." She unlocked the hidden panel on her wrist, chains clattering to the floor. Inside was a small beacon, glowing with strange light. She lifted it and pressed it to her chest, her voice steady. She said, "This is the last secret of my house, the call to the loyal, the call to the hidden." Beacon lit the dark sky, and moments later the stars themselves seemed to move from shadows around the fortress. A fleet appeared, old ships, battered but proud, flying the forgotten banner of her house. They had waited for her call. They had waited for their princess to return, and now they answered. The enemy froze in shock, their lines breaking, as the loyal fleet charged into battle, fire against fire, light against dark. Traitor fought with everything he had, his ship torn and bleeding, but still flying. He fired through enemy lines, covering the princess as she broadcast her voice across all channels, her words filled with power. She said, "I am no slave, I am no ghost. I am the last daughter of the throne you tried to burn, and I have returned today. I rise, and I rise with my people." Her voice carried like thunder across the stars, and those who heard it felt their hearts shift. The loyal rose with fury. The enemy wavered, the battle raged, fire tearing through the void. The traitor beside her never faltered, though death brushed his shoulders. He fought for her, not for gold, not for glory, but for the truth of her spirit. At last the fortress itself shook as the loyal fleet broke its walls. The princess stood tall, her face lit by flames, her voice steady. She said, "Take it back, and They did, the fortress fell, the enemy scattered, the throne once thought lost. Shone again though, scarred though, broken, it still stood when silence returned, when the stars grew calm again. The princess turned to the traitor, her eyes heavy with both sorrow and hope. She said, "It is done, my crown is mine again, but it was not power that gave it back to me. It was trust, it was honor, it was you." He shook his head and said, "I only did what was right." She smiled for the first time, truly smiled, and said, "And that is what makes you greater than any king." She freed herself from the last of her chains, and in that moment, she was no longer a slave, no longer hidden. She was a queen reborn. Her people gathered around her ships, bowing banners, raised voices, shouting her name. Yet she turned to the traitor and said, "Come with me, for you are part of this. Now you are part of my story." He hesitated. A man who once had only debts and dust now offered a place beside a throne, but when he looked into her eyes, he knew his answer. He said, "I will walk with you, not as your master, not as your servant, but as your ally, as your friend, as long as the stars shine." She nodded and touched his shoulder. Her eyes soft with gratitude, she said, "Then let this bond be the start of a new age." And so the story of the traitor who took a slave as payment became the story of a man who carried a princess to her destiny together. They turned chains into crowns, sorrow into fire, and silence into a voice that shook the stars. Empire that thought her dead now trembled before her. The hunters who chased her now fled before her. The people who had lost hope now rose again for their queen, and through it all the traitor stood by her side, no longer alone, no longer a wanderer. For he had found his purpose in the fire of her spirit, in the endless black of space. Their ship now flew not in hiding, but in light banners, flying voices singing a queen reborn, and a man who showed that humanity was never weak but strong in honor. Strong in heart, strong in standing for what was right. And the stars watched as the hidden princess rose, and the traitor, who once lived for nothing, now lived for everything they had built together. The end.